second in the table, cruising towards the medal target. Just how good could the Rio Olympics be for Team GB? After a sensational weekend, another gold this afternoon for Charlotte Dujardin in the dressage. And we look at the years of national planning and thought that's now paying off in our Olympic success. Also on News at 10 tonight. The most dangerous journey on earth into Aleppo with vital supplies. A special report by the British aid worker risking everything to save lives. Was a weak heart to blame for former footballer Dalian Atkinson's death 90 minutes after being tasered by police? And Trump's recipe for beating Islamic State, an ideology test for immigrants.
The time is overdue to develop a new screening test for the threats we face today. I call it extreme vetting.
This is ITV News at 10 with Raghi Omar.
Good evening. The Rio Olympics have already written themselves into the sporting history of the UK as they are on course to become the most successful foreign games in Britain's history, and there is still a week to go. Not only do the medals just keep on coming, the games keep on throwing up historic sporting firsts for British Olympic achievements. The first British tennis champion to defend his Olympic gold, the first golds in gymnastics, and even this afternoon, the first medal for hammer throwing. And in the next half hour or so, there could be another cycling medal, a first for Mark Cavendish.
It was a golden weekend, unlike any other in Olympic history. From tennis to golf, cycling to gymnastics. British athletes at the pinnacle of their sports, revelling in each other's success.
Stars with the sport.
And any concerns Team GB would suffer that Monday morning feeling were misplaced. The immaculate Charlotte Dujardin retaining her dressage title today. You don't need to be an expert to admire how such power is encouraged to behave with such precision and grace. Even the superstars who've done it all before struggle to contain themselves. Andy Murray's hard-won gold late last night, the fifth and final act of spectacular team success on a record-breaking Sunday. Earlier, Max Whitlock's golden double had surprised even him, but there seems to be a special momentum building in Rio. Whitlock and gymnastics teammate Lewis Smith, a veteran of 3 games and silver medalist here, strongly believe success breeds success.
As soon as you start getting the ball rolling, most people believe, it could be possible. It pushes people harder. And, to be standing there with a medal is a very proud feeling, and every athlete wants that.
I've really felt it the last couple of days, the momentum picking up now with GB athletes and the momentum. It's such a good buzz. Everyone's pictures are on the side of the wall and it shows you who's done what, medals and who's coming up next and stuff.
Yesterday, Justin Rose got what he came for. A multi-millionaire golfer, maybe, world rank 9, yes. But here, just proud to be part of it all.
You kind of keep tabs on the medal count and how it's ticking along and the progress of everybody and how it's comparing to our expectations, and so to have contributed a medal and to have contributed a gold is unbelievable.
Many believe living under the same roof in the village is key to fostering this special bond.
It's a lovely sensation to walk out and they say people congratulate, or you get a chance to congratulate other people, or you've been in the room for a little while and you've just seen somebody win, and then that evening they come back, and it is actually a team, and that's what's very, very special.
And as far as medal-hungry GB is concerned, the quicker the sun rises each day on this Olympic city, the better. Steve Scott, News at 10, Rio de Janeiro.
You have to go back to the 1920s to equal yesterday's one-day total of 9 GB medals. But our second-place position in the table is no fluke. Yes, the athletes have put in years of hard work, but hard cash is what has really made the difference ever since lottery funding began in 1997. One estimate suggests each GB medal in Rio has cost around £5.5 million.
Inspired by Rio's success, all across Britain today, youngsters were honing their skills in Olympic events. At Max Whitlock's gym, at diving gold medalist Jack Law's pool, and long jumper Greg Rutherford's track in Milton Keynes.
It makes me inspired that it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, you can still make it.
So why is Team GB doing so well? The simple answer is money. And John Major. It was his government's decision to funnel cash raised by the National Lottery into Olympic sport that's paying off so spectacularly.
National Lottery funding started to flow to support athletes and sports in about 1998. 97, 98. And since then we've been actually developing a programme of support within each and every sport that has actually enabled athletes to train and compete against the very best in the world.
But why should money make our athletes better? Well, let's take as an example Gaius Thompson, a full-time gymnast hoping to make it to the next Olympics. Here's why.
We can just focus on our sport. We can focus on the thing we love most, and we don't have to worry about doing a job or anything like that. You just come in, do your job, and you go home.
Back in 1996, pre-lottery funding, we spent £20 million and got just 15 medals in Atlanta. At London 2012, we spent £265 million, which helped push the team to a record 65 medals. In Rio, it's now £274 million, and there's a new record almost every day now. The system is simple. If you win medals, you get more money. For example, in the last decade, cycling has had nearly £80 million and won 37 medals. But it's ruthless too. Take basketball. It didn't do well at London 2012 and lost all of its funding, and they didn't even qualify for Rio. But if you like winners, it works. Ian Payne, News at 10.
It certainly does. And Steve joins me from Rio. Now, Steve, attention tonight again on the velodrome and some drama for Mark Cavendish.
That's right, Raggy. He's racing in the Omnium tonight. A short time ago, he was currently in third, but before that, a bit of controversy. He crashed into, well, the leader at the time and indeed the favourite as he was going, as Mark Cavendish is going for his first ever Olympic medals. Staying in the velodrome because tomorrow night, talking about a medal count, 3 more chances for gold out there. Jason Kenny could get his 6th to match Sir Chris Hoy, but it's not just the strong sports like cycling where Team GB has been striking medals since they've been here. Of course, there was a trampolining silver on Saturday, and then I think all of that notion was typified this afternoon in the athletics stadium when there was a bronze medal in the hammer for Sophie Hitchin, the first British woman ever to get a medal in the hammer at the Olympic Games.
And we're still second in the table, which is just amazing. Do you think it can last?
It could do. Second, yes, neck and neck really with China. They could overtake us any day now, really. But what we did today was, and it's not scientific, I must tell you, was a little bit of a calculation, erring on the side of optimism, having a look at what events were left. And on the assumption that every British competitor from here on in does their very best, there is potential perhaps for another 25 more medals. Now, if you add that to tonight's 40, that takes you up to 65, which matches London. I say it's quite an optimistic calculation, but one thing it does guarantee is that this team will get to their stated aim, which is getting past the medal count in Beijing.
All right, Steve Scott in Rio. Thanks very much indeed, Steve. To other news now, and in a civil war that for 5 years has thrown up so many stories of horror and brutality, the plight of the 300,000 civilians besieged in the east of the Syrian city of Aleppo has been taking place out of sight of the world's news cameras, and it has been there for months. 2 weeks ago, we turned to a British aid worker who managed to send us pictures from inside one of the city's outlying hospitals. It was grim viewing. We said then that Tox Sharif was trying to organise a relief convoy to take supplies into Aleppo. And so, against all the odds and under fire, he has, and once again, sent us exclusive pictures.
Big, fat plumes of smoke. Mad.
There can be few roads in the world more dangerous than the route into Aleppo. For a week, this was as close as this aid convoy was able to go. Tox, an aid worker from East London, stuck just outside that ravaged city with 3 tons of desperately needed food.
We've got lots of stuff. All of this stuff comes directly from the UK. We've got chickpeas, peeled plum tomatoes. We've even got some Heinz baked beans, okay?
At last, word comes through. Syrian government forces have been pushed back. There is a chance. Though first, the battered former NHS ambulance that will carry the supplies gets a crude camouflage coating of mud to hide it from warplanes. Tox leads a 3-vehicle convoy, which had barely reached the outskirts of Aleppo when the area comes under fire.
Whoa. Oh, look at that explosion, look at that explosion. Regime checkpoint, you can...
They pass a checkpoint which until a few days earlier had been manned by Assad soldiers. Then disaster. The ambulance engine dies at the same time as government jets are launching an attack. There's no choice but to run for it as multiple explosions erupt around them.
Wow, look at this place, man, look at the place.
Only 2 of the original 3 vehicles complete the journey into the besieged city.
Look, you can see this is what we have to do, okay? To get aid in to those people that are being choked.
The precious load is delivered. Tomorrow it will be distributed among the trapped civilian population, though some have been given their share already. There's good news for Tox. His old NHS ambulance, complete with tons of food, has been recovered.
They towed it here.
Now he calls at an overworked hospital. He has medical supplies for them. But before they can be handed over, in the early hours of the next morning, the warplanes return.
We've just been here at the hospital again. Wallahi, we're in Aleppo City. We've just been here right now.
Through the dust and wreckage, it's clear the hospital has been hit. Tox rushes to investigate. Thankfully, it's not the wards this time, but the building that provides the hospital's power that's been targeted.
All electrics are broken. This basically means the hospital is out of service. Look, we've got no roof on this building no more.
Over the next few hours, there would be 5 more airstrikes. For the residents, it's just another day in Aleppo.
You see what they're saying? They're saying that we will be steadfast. Wallahi, half an hour here and I want to go home. Really, I want to go home to my mum right now. This is too much for me. These people are saying that they're going to stay. 6 strikes. I've never, ever, in 4 years of being here in Syria, never faced anything like this. I've never faced anything like this.
Clearly shaken, he has still been out today, distributing the aid brought in at considerable risk. Paul Davis, News at 10.
Tox Sharif in Aleppo. Well, millions of Syrians, each with searing and tragic human stories, have fled cities like Aleppo in the midst of Syria's war. Amongst them is Sosan Shahood. We first caught up with her on the Greek island of Lesbos last November. She and her son and husband had just come ashore on an overcrowded boat. They headed to Germany, but only now are they able to start applying for asylum in a country where attitudes to refugees have been hardening.
It's the first room we have here in Germany. And it's a good room.
This small, cramped room in a town outside Frankfurt may not be much, but it's a dream come true for Sosan Shahood. Along with her husband and her 7-year-old son, she risked her life to get here.
You can live, you know, and have lights, have electricity, and...
This place is like a palace for you then?
Yeah, it was paradise, if you compare it to Syria.
This is where we first met Sosan, as she hit land in Greece on a boat packed with migrants. It had been a treacherous journey in the pitch dark. Made not through choice, she told me, but desperation.
We are running away from everything, from danger, from the Assad regime, from Daesh, from everything, and nobody is gonna help us. When we leave our country, that is not a choice. It's not my choice that I leave my country. It's not my choice. I put my son in this risk.
Now, 9 months on, the family are finally beginning the asylum process. This morning they were taken for their first interview. More than 1 million refugees have arrived in Germany since the start of this crisis. The authorities are overwhelmed. A lot has changed in the short time Sausan and her family have been here. A series of attacks across Europe, 2 here in Germany, carried out by people who travelled that same migrant route, have left this country feeling nervous and less welcoming. Germany's doors, once open, are now starting to close, and not everyone who made it here will be allowed to settle down. Sausan's interview went well, but there will be more to follow. They won't hear a final decision for several weeks. Back in the room they all share, she told me she understands the anxiety of the German people, but it gives her worries of her own.
I don't know if they will accept my son to be in the schools with their children in the future. We spend days thinking about that. And this is not easy. And it's not our fault, you know, because like them, we are against these people. I don't agree with these attacks. It's something not human at all.
The family are all learning the language. They've made friends here, Syrians and locals too. For now, this place is a sanctuary, but one day they hope to call it home. Martin Geisler, News at 10, Langenselbold, Germany.
For more than a year, Saudi Arabia has been leading a military coalition of Arab states to restore the former president of Yemen to power. They have been bombing targets of Yemen's Houthi fighters, or they're supposed to be. Today, the charity Médecins Sans Frontières said one of its hospitals had been hit by a Saudi-led airstrike. It did not put a figure on casualties, but local reports said at least 7 people had been killed and 13 others wounded. In the past decade, police tasers have been linked to the deaths of 10 people in England and Wales, all personal tragedies. But none of those has attracted the attention and scrutiny of police tactics that the death of former footballer Dalian Atkinson will do. The one-time Aston Villa player died after one of the stun guns was used on him in the early hours of this morning. From across football, there have been many tributes, and from campaign groups, many questions.
How did a family argument end with the death of a former Premier League footballer shortly after being tasered by police in the street? Relatives say the former Aston Villa striker Dalian Atkinson was being treated for kidney problems. Today his nephew demanded answers, describing him as a gentle giant.
My uncle is just gone. You know, I don't know, it just infuriates me how the police and they process you and they deal with things.
Neighbours say Dalian Atkinson was friendly and let children play inside his expensive 4x4. But last night his father is reported as saying his son was agitated, threatening and upset, possibly on drink or drugs. People heard shouting and screaming and someone called the police.
The gentleman was walking towards the police and I heard the policeman say about the taser. And he's sort of still stumbling forward, so I don't know if he was drunk or that was difficult to see completely. And then he tasered him, and as he dropped like a lead balloon.
A post-mortem examination will be held later this week to determine how Dalian Atkinson died a short time later. But his friends and family will want the police to justify why they used this controversial weapon. Tasers were introduced in 2003 and at least 10 deaths have been linked to them in England and Wales. Before officers deploy them, they need to decide, often in a split second, if it is legal, necessary and appropriate. They have to give a verbal warning and must show the weapon before discharging it. Dalian Atkinson is perhaps best remembered for what remains one of the best goals in Premier League history. Today his manager at Aston Villa remembered him fondly.
He was a happy sort of guy, you know, he's always smiling, very popular with his teammates. And as a player, he had immense talent, scorer of spectacular goals.
As detectives gathered evidence into his death, it emerged tonight that the officers involved were not wearing body cameras. But the police watchdog has promised a full and thorough investigation. Ben Chapman, News at 10, Telford.
Making a big foreign policy speech when you are running for president is always going to make news, but when the candidate is Donald Trump, it becomes a major set-piece event. Hardly surprising, given what Mr. Trump has said, that as president he'd build a wall on the Mexican border, block all immigration from Muslim countries and let Japan and Saudi Arabia have nuclear weapons, amongst many other things. Well, he shed more light tonight on what a foreign policy under a President Trump would look like.
Trump may be in trouble at the polls, but he's in no mood to compromise. This was the latest vision of his foreign policy, and it was vintage Trump.
We will have to temporarily suspend immigration from some of the most dangerous and volatile regions of the world that have a history of exporting terrorism. Not for us, not for us.
And he talked about introducing tougher entry requirements for some visitors to ensure they share American values.
I call it extreme vetting. I call it extreme vetting.
He blamed President Obama for the rise of ISIS directly and said he would choose America's future allies based on their opposition to Islamist terrorism.
And any country which shares this goal will be our ally. We cannot always choose our friends, but we can never fail to recognize our enemies.
That's a signal for a closer relationship with this man, Vladimir Putin, and Russia. Something his opponents mock him for.
I know Russia well. I had a major event in Russia 2 or 3 years ago, Miss Universe contest.
Trump's opponents consistently exploit what they say is Trump's weakness on foreign affairs.
If Putin wants to go in, and I got to know him very well because we were both on 60 Minutes.
Today, Hillary Clinton, out on the campaign trail in Pennsylvania, again twisted the credibility knife.
You know, sometimes he says he won't tell anyone what he'll do because he wants to keep his plan, quote, secret. And then it turns out the secret is he has no plan.
Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you.
Trump's speech leaves no doubt about the values he believes will take him to the White House. His supporters will have liked it as much as his opponents will have loathed it.
Penny's in Washington. Penny, was there anything really new or detailed in his speech tonight?
Yes, he talked a bit more about this extreme vetting and what a Trump term that is, extreme vetting. Basically, he's talked about building a wall between Mexico and the US, but this is some sort of wall between America and the rest of the world. Vetting as many as 100 million visitors came to Florida alone last year. Imagine it, vetting everybody who sets foot in the US. Now, it seems that it's already creating a backlash, even amongst Republicans, who some are calling it unworkable and un-American. But I think it's too early, again, to really write Trump off. He seems to get more extreme when he's down in the polls, which is the situation at the moment. He plays to the crowds. But there's a long way to go. And in some ways, being the underdog and having the disapproval of the establishment could work in his favour in the long term.
Penny in Washington, thanks very much indeed. Inspired by horror films, so-called zombie knives long ago moved from the screen to the streets. They don't just look dangerous. Because of their size, serrated edges and design, they are very. Just ask the families of those killed by them. But from Thursday, they are to be banned in England and Wales.
There's no obvious use for these knives, if not to cause harm. But zombie knives have been on sale legally in the UK for as little as £8. A ban on these weapons comes into effect this week, a measure that's far too late for Stefan Appleton's mother. Her youngest child killed in an attack using a zombie knife last year.
You don't bring your children up for someone else to take their lives. No one can imagine what we're going through unless they've been through it themselves. That's the worst thing about it. He wasn't ill. He didn't take his own life. He was murdered. And that's a parent's worst nightmare.
How Stefan died has compounded the family's grief. The zombie killer machete used in the attack was shown to them at the trial of the 17-year-old who killed him.
They had to show us a picture of the knife because of how horrific it was, and they didn't want us to be too shocked in the courtroom, and we were absolutely just horrified and shocked, and we just literally broke down because we couldn't believe that someone would use that on a person.
Despite the ban, promotional videos glamorising zombie knives and websites selling them will still exist online. And some say young people will still choose to carry weapons.
I've had so many of my friends being stabbed. Most of the time it's through being scared that they'll actually use it, because they'll pull it out because somebody's threatening them, and then they end up using it.
For families like Stefan's, the worry is banning these weapons isn't going to get them off our streets or protect other teenagers from knife crime. Sally Lockwood, News at 10.
While the Prime Minister enjoys her hiking holiday in the Swiss Alps, other ministers are taking their turn at being in charge. Last week it was the Chancellor Philip Hammond. This week it is Boris Johnson. Our political correspondent Paul Brand is in Downing Street. He's wanted to be in charge for some while, Paul. What does it actually mean?
Well, Raggy, they've just been drawing the curtains here in Downing Street this evening, but Boris Johnson isn't settling into bed behind them. He's not literally acting in the role of Prime Minister with his finger on the nuclear button. Instead, Downing Street tell me that Theresa May is still very firmly in charge. Emphasis on the word firmly. She is getting regular updates out in Switzerland while she's on holiday. So what this does mean is that Boris Johnson is the most senior minister on call, if you like, if something happens here in the UK. In that situation, he would be asked to come in, oversee things while Theresa May was immediately coming back to Britain. Now, that is pretty standard practice. Nick Clegg, for example, filled in for David Cameron. John Prescott filled in, of course, for Tony Blair. But, of course, some in Westminster are having quite a lot of fun with this story, given the fact that Boris Johnson always dreamt of this job. But like his bid to be Tory leader, the post is probably going to be, or definitely going to be, pretty short-lived because Theresa May is back next week.
All right, Paul, thanks very much indeed in Downing Street. Finally, if you are watching closely during our Olympic reports at the start of the programme, you might have spotted quite a few empty seats behind the competitors. Not, of course, for last night's 100 metres. The presence of Usain Bolt made sure of that. The organisers will be hoping his electrifying win will help attract more Brazilians who, until now, have seemed reluctant to embrace the Games.
It took you-know-who to finally bring Rio to life. And all in less than 10 scintillating seconds. As ever, Bolt took victory in his long stride. Cue trademark celebration and adoring crowd. But too many athletes here have got the silent treatment from row upon row of unfilled seats. Organisers hope a turning point's been reached.
It's always disappointing not to have a completely full stage, and what we should remember is there are many venues around this Olympic Park which have been absolutely teeming to the rafters, with incredible atmospheres, swimming, gymnastics. We saw athletics last night, packed to the rafters.
Some who cannot get to the Games have the Games brought to them. In a Rio suburb, children compete in a DIY Olympics. If not a field of dreams, then perhaps a side street of high hopes. But who here will see the real thing?
How many of you want to go to the Olympics? And how many of you actually got tickets? Just one.
The coach's Olympic torch is authentic. He carried it in the relay. But that's as close as he'll get to the Games themselves.
The price of tickets is high. The transport is difficult. It's in a rich part of town. It's not for poor people.
Of course, they're inspired by the real thing. But you might also argue that these mini Olympians have captured something sadly missing from Rio 2016 in the energy and enthusiasm of so many ordinary Brazilians. Organisers are now handing out unsold tickets to the city's school children. But with Rio's rival attractions free and easy, it might be too much to ask Brazil to fall in love with athletics. Still, at least last night's brief encounter was thrilling. John Ray, News at 10, Rio.
And in the last few minutes, that cycling event, the final of the Omnium, has ended with a silver for Team GB's Mark Cavendish, his first Olympic medal. Tom's here tomorrow, but from me and everyone on the programme, good night.